tatsächlich was zu mir. Ich bin jetzt 26 Jahre alt. Ich habe ursprünglich VWL studiert in Bonn, war dann ein paar Jahre bei KPMG im IT-Consulting tätig, habe da Beratungsprojekte erst für DAX-Konzerne in Deutschland gemacht und dann später eine Innovationsabteilung mit Rapid Prototyping aufgebaut. Von da aus habe ich dann noch ein Startup gegründet, mit Timo zusammen, vorletztes Jahr, 2021 gestartet. Und seit 2022 bin ich jetzt bei Codesphere und mache eben unser ganzes Marketing. Und in dem Zuge hatten wir die Ehre oder die Freude, tatsächlich ein monolithisches System bei Codesphere ursprünglich nach und nach aufzubrechen und dahin zu kommen, dass wir tatsächlich einzelne Komponenten und auch ganze Komponenten AB testen können. Und ich habe im letzten halben Jahr wirklich mich extrem viel mit dem Thema beschäftigt. Ich habe mehrere Blogartikel geschrieben. Ich habe, wie gesagt, AB-Tests noch und nöcher durchgeführt. Deswegen können wir, glaube ich, heute ganz gut eine tatsächliche Hands-on-Session machen. Kurz zur Agenda. Ich würde quasi einsteigen mit AB-Testing generell, beziehungsweise datengetriebenen Entscheidungen. Da kommt noch jemand. Sehr schön. Hallo Julita. Kannst du uns hören?
Hello.
Hi. Julita, English or German?
English.
All right, I can switch to English. The other people in the call were German so far, so I started in German, but I'm more than happy to do it in English, if that's all right for the German-speaking people in the audience. Let's do it in English. So first I'm going to start with some introduction into data-driven decision-making and AB tests in general. I will present some basic concepts that we need in order to get set up with an AB tests. We will go over the analytics behind it. We will talk about funnel analysis. We will talk about breakdown data. We will talk about experiments and some of the limitations of AB tests. Then we will go into AB tests that we do here at Codesphere, just giving you some examples of the AB tests that we run. And then we will do an example setup with Posthoc and Codesphere, where I will show you from start to finish how to set up an AB test. And then we have some advanced topics like micro front ends, and then an outlook on composable commerce, which is one of our upcoming webinars. And also we will have time for questions. The whole presentation should only take around 15 minutes, so we'll have plenty of time for questions afterwards. Also, feel free to interrupt me at any time if another question comes up. All right, why is A/B testing important in general? The main reason is that decision-making can be very hard. I've prepared some introduction slides with screenshots of Timo and me. And basically, if you're in a team arguing about one way or another, how to implement a certain page or a certain feature, there's obviously going to be disagreement on who prefers which option. And if you don't have any decision-making help, making a choice can be difficult. And I mean, that's the same for a lot of examples here. But basically the idea is, if you have data, there is no arguing over who likes what option best. The data will give you an answer, and that's in form of which of the versions, variant A or B, actually performs better. All right, first, basics. We need to have some sort of analytics software installed in our web shop or website or anything we want to A/B test. We have 3 tools here with some advantages and disadvantages. Posthoc is our current go-to tool at Codesphere. The advantage is it's open source. It's pretty cheap if you're not processing like millions of events each month. From our perspective, it's got one of the best visualization suites out there. The drawback is that it's not as easy to get started because it's a bit more getting into it, a bit steeper learning curve. And the amount of integrations is also less than, for example, with Google Analytics. Google Analytics is probably the tool that everybody's heard of. It's the market leader. It's got integrations to almost all third-party tools out there. It's super simple to use, but on the other hand, some of the features are lacking. There's no user pass, there's no user recordings, and a bunch of other things that the other tools have are missing in Google Analytics. Mixpanel is also a really cool tool. I like that a lot. We used to have Mixpanel before switching to Posthoc. It's very easy to use. The visuals are super nice looking. The issue is that it can get very expensive very fast, depending on the plan that you're on. And also there's no user recordings and backend tracking in Mixpanel. Yeah, that's just hopefully giving you some ideas of what tools are out there. I can really recommend Posthoc. Posthoc's actually really cool, and we will see some Posthoc later in the demo, in the live demo also. All right, what's next? We need to talk about funnel analysis. And for me, it's so helpful to distinguish between the right way and the wrong way, or a better way to think about funnel analysis. Basically, if you think that funnel analysis is just another word for conversion rate and just one more KPI you want to optimize, you're obviously going to fail because it's actually so much more than that. Also, if you define your funnel before actually looking at raw data, you risk getting the order of the steps wrong, which will make any funnel analysis basically useless. The better thought approach about this is funnel analysis is a tool, and it'll help you make decisions on your website. Basically, any decision, whether something gets implemented or not, should be based on data that you've collected through a test or something else. And then from that data, you can have a tool to make decisions for your e-commerce shop. And then I have a picture here of a typical e-commerce funnel. Usually it starts on a cart, then you have a checkout, and then some kind of order confirmation page. And for e-commerce, since the funnel tends to be very similar for almost any e-commerce sites, you can also look up benchmark and industry standard conversion rates for each of these steps. So there's a benchmark conversion from homepage to product page, for example. And if you collect that data for your site, you can get a rough idea if your numbers are actually in the better industry or above average or below average. And if they are significantly below average in one of the steps, this would be a good starting point to optimize later on. All right, next basic concept that we need to understand is how to break down data. It's important that once you start collecting data, that you also break it down by different subcategories. This will help you understand existing variations in your data. So for example, the conversion funnel might be completely different based on the origin of the user. So you could break the data down by campaign. You could also break it down by a device, like on desktop or mobile. And you can break it down by any of your ad parameters that you run, say by Google compared to Facebook. Like those are the typical things you want to look at. And it will help you understand where you already have some variation and what you can exploit from that. Also, we will need to break down the data later to check whether version A or B performs better once we've ran a test. More on that later. All right, the next basic concept will be experiments. And an experiment always starts with a hypothesis. So basically, you want to say, okay, we believe adding, say, a trust logo on the homepage will make our website appear more trustworthy and appealing to customers, and therefore the conversion between funnel step 1 and 2 should increase. And it's important that you actually write this down and also specify which funnel steps you hope to improve with your experiment, and write down the benchmark funnel step drop-off or conversion rate. Right? One is the people that leave, and the other one is the people that stay. It's the same if you subtract it from one. But basically, it's important to note that, because later, after you've ran the experiment, you want to actually go back to that hypothesis that you set up and the benchmark, and see which of your versions, compared to the benchmark, perform better. You'll also want to specify the test period beforehand, say 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 1.5 weeks maybe. And you also want to make sure that you have sufficient traffic during that time period. For us, the typical... Okay, thank you, Anselm. And you also want to have, for us, our rule of thumb is we want to have at least 500 people per variant in order to get statistical significance. Because otherwise you might drive your data by outliers too much. All right, next step. Let's talk a bit about the limitations of funnel analysis. The main problem with the typical funnel analysis is that it's linear, meaning you have predefined steps from homepage to product page to checkout, and the actual user journey through your product might be different. People might be jumping around more, they might skip steps. There are a lot of different ways where your assumed funnel, your linear funnel, might fail. So getting that order right in the first place is very important. And if your users are jumping off or jumping between steps too much, it will get very hard to identify the correct drop-off points. Also, if you have a test that influences the order which people take through your product, that would also lead to inaccurate results. Another limitation is you can typically only run a certain amount of tests in parallel. So for each test you want to run, you want to make sure that there's no statistical interference between them. So that limits the amount of tests you can do in parallel. Something I've already mentioned is you need enough traffic. What that also means is that if you want to test conversion steps later in the process, say the checkout, it's much harder to get enough traffic on that conversion step. It's much easier to check or to test the earlier, the top of funnel steps. And typically, with existing A/B testing tools out there, it was only possible to test visual changes like layout, button designs, and texts. With Codesphere, it will become possible to test entire components, but more on that later. What I've shown here below is something that's called User Pass. It's a visual that Postdoc offers out of the box, and that's basically the opposite of a linear funnel. So this is like a funnel view, but you don't define the steps beforehand. It will just observe how users travel through your application, and the more people take a certain path, the thicker the line will become. And this allows you to see some of the non-linearity in your funnel and then act accordingly. All right. Now to some A/B tests here at Codesphere. We have the challenge that our funnel is completely non-linear for the most part, because we're not a typical e-commerce. We have sign up, we have demo, and then a bunch of blog pages, and then people do tend to jump around quite a bit. We have the need for very fast iterations, because we want to do the amount of things we want to test is very high, and that's why we need to be quick when doing tests. And we had the challenge that initially our entire website was part of the dev team version control, which means that any changes to the website would have to go through an extensive review process, would have to wait for a weekly release, and all of these things. So our focus has been to split our application into multiple components that we can test individually and that we can maintain here in the marketing team without relying on the dev processes. So far, we've tested website hero texts, we have tested trust components, and we've tested different use case sub websites with something that's called micro frontends. I hope we can go into that a bit more later, but it's definitely more of an advanced feature. And for us, it's only the start. We're currently planning tests on entire components along sign-up forms, onboarding modals, and then checkout components, which go way beyond a typical visual change, right? It's a completely different backend, and I will show you how that's possible in a second. Let's go into Codesphere itself. I will show you how you could set up an A/B test. So let me pull up Codesphere here. So basically what we have in here is workspaces, and workspaces think of it like a server, and each workspace hosts an application. In this example, it's a WordPress shop, and we have two of them, as you can see. It's WordPress AB1 and AB2. Currently, both of them are connected to this alex.codesphere.com domain. And I mean, setting up a WordPress shop in Codesphere is fairly simple. You just use the WordPress template, select some resources, provide a name, and hit the start coding button. It will do the rest automatically and fairly quickly. For the sake of demonstration, let's go into one of the existing ones already. So this WordPress shop has some themes installed, and what we want to do now is go into the header of that theme. If you're running a custom platform or shopware of any kind, I mean, you will always have the option to add something to your header. And what we have in here are fairly simple. It's just a script that we get from the onboarding modal in Posthoc. You just copy it in here, and that will make sure that your data gets transmitted to your Posthoc instance. And then the important bit is here. We have another script tag that's called posthoc.register, which will basically tell our analytics software what variant we're talking here. So this is you can give it a name, whatever you want, but we use here experiment, and this is called control. If you go into the second shop that I've set up here for this demonstration, go into the header, it says experiment variant. So these are the two options that we're going to compare against each other. Now let's go into, one more thing. Once you've set up your versions A and B of the service that you want to test, it's important that you connect both of them to the same domain. It's really simple here in Codesphere. You just select your domain. In this case, we're using this alex.codesphere.com, and you can select the WordPress, the shops that you want to test against, hit the update button, and now half of the traffic will go to WordPress AB1 and the other half will go to WordPress AB2. All right, once we've set this up, let's head into Posthoc. And just for the sake of demonstration, because I mean, as I said, you need actual traffic on a site to show the funnel. This is different. It's a different site now. It's one of our clients. They've been running some A/B tests as well. And I like to use those for the demonstration because now you can see this is the homepage. There's no drop off here. Everybody lands on a homepage some way or another. And then we have a breakdown. In pink, you see the variant control, and or the other way around, pink is the version B in this case, and the green one would be the control group. And as you can see, actually, compared to before, we've improved our conversion rate. So here we have 28.8 and the benchmark was 27.13. So it's actually quite significant improvement. And if we click into one of these events, I will show you in a second. Hoping it loads. Yes, let's just take an example, look at one of these people, right? This is all the data that poster collects. Some actually have like a city name and all that. And we can also see the events that this person did throughout our application. And if you open one of these here and scroll a bit, you will see the flag that we just set in Codesphere experiment. In this case, it was called 2022-11-7 and menu. So they did test an entirely different menu structure in their shop. And it turns out it actually performs better than what they had before. So after the set test round, they decided to implement this full time. And that's it. That's how you set up an A/B test in Codesphere. I could show you one more thing for our own websites here. We have these our sub-modules here also in Codesphere. So ecommerce.codesphere.com is one of the sites that we have, and this one has multiple variants that are running against each other. And then we will analyze the data and pick the one that performs best, and then transfer that onto the main code repository. All right. There's also a blog article here which you can read to get the details if you want to reproduce that later. Now some advanced topics, as I've spoiled before. Let's talk a bit about micro front ends, because the cool thing about A/B testing with tools like Codesphere is that you're no longer limited to test like smaller visual changes. You can actually change or compare entire components against each other. And the way we do it, the marketing team has a bunch of components that they maintain. Here you can see the examples. It's the ecommerce.codesphere.com, saas.codesphere.com. And all of these are running in independent containers. Containers meaning an individual Codesphere workspace in this case, but it could be any other hoster as well. And they're then pulled together on one aggregation layer, which is basically taking the individual puzzle pieces, the individual micro front ends, and putting it into one site. In our case, it's codesphere.com, which will have these components embedded. On the other hand, we have the dev team, which is maintaining their own components and working on them independently. And we can now that we've split the components into individual pieces, we can now actually start testing each individual component. There can be A, B, C, D, F version of each component, and we can compare how they perform and then keep the ones that perform the best. It is a bit more complicated to set up than a monolithic approach, but long-term, it's a lot more flexible. And for us, the freedom to test stuff without needing the dev team involved has been a game changer. It's really made our team much more effective. And then small outlook on composable commerce. We will have an extra webinar on composable commerce, which then takes this modular approach to the highest mode and actually separates all individual pieces of an e-commerce shop, combines them with a headless front end that you can actually swap. You could compare like a Shopify checkout with a WooCommerce checkout if you wanted to, or you could compare the entire shop systems if you wanted to. Really, there's no limitation here. But for that, we'll do a separate webinar. I'll have a QR code for you to sign up. You can scan that QR code now, or we'll send you the presentation afterwards. So yeah, 2 of the webinars down, page speed and A/B testing. The next one is staging environments, where we talk about how to get into an updating mode that is ideally not breaking your site, and how that can work. And then composable commerce is combining all the three steps that we talked before: testing components, making them fast, and having staging environments into something that's then really flexible and advanced, cool stuff for your e-commerce shop. All right, again, the QR code to book a demo with Timo in case any of you want to try out Codesphere to host their stuff. And of course, feel free to ask questions now.